Welcome to True Crime Cases. Today, we are unveiling a shocking story. Brooklyn, New York, a vibrant underground, with its lively, varied neighborhoods, streets, and the city's incessant buzz. Life tucked away in this lively setting was Kevin Madison High School, esteemed establishment in the center of the neighborhood where Natalia, English instructor Natalia, age 34, spent her days doing what she was known for, being firm yet fair, as well as her pupils frequently mentioned her with a combination of Natalia's dread and adoration were intense tongue and an astute mind that made her a formidable presence in the home classroom. However, things were different. Natalia lived in a humble brownstone in a quiet lane far distant from the city's vitality. Her spouse, Parker, drove a long-haul truck, frequently absent for days or weeks at a time, after their union had begun with love and desire. Yet as time goes by, having become chilly due to the extended absences, missed dates, and the ordinary, the daily grind of life has taken their Natalia's toll, revealed her emotions. Growingly alone and dissatisfied, imprisoned in a life that had become spark that occurred during one of Parker's long journeys that Natalia initially saw. Jonah was 17 years old, with an innate charm that made him well-liked by his peers. A basketball star who is tall and athletic with a potentially contagious smile. Upper room, yet below his assured. Outside, Jonah was having academic difficulties. Were sliding, putting him at risk of. Natalia never graduated, although she always wanted to volunteer to assist a kid in need. He began their lessons after school. Out naively enough, concentrated on catching up on assignments, getting ready for tests. But as they spending more time with Natalia, she started to take note of anything that Jonah hadn't before. The way his eyes lingered a bit too long on her, the casual touches that made her heart race, the way he appeared to cling to her spine. There was energy in every syllable between them and their unsaid love that one night neither could ignore. Following a particularly rigorous study, Jonah leaned closer during the session. Then his breath was warm on her as usual skin as he spoke, something in a whisper that made her chuckle, a sincere and profound laugh that she had not communicated with herself for a long time. Natalia instinctively stretched out and stroked his arm, and at that very moment, something changed, and Jonah looked in the direction, his lustful, dark gaze, and before she was able to prevent their lips from meeting in, the kiss was as intense as it was prohibited. That kiss was the start of an affair they would both be consumed by. Natalia was aware that it was improper and that she was going beyond what was possible. Not crossed, but the excitement was too drunk to resist. Jonah forced her to. Feeling alive once more gave her a sense of belonging in. Parker hadn't done so in years. Started having covert meetings to steal moments in Natalia's vehicle, amid vacant classrooms in the shadowy areas of the school where nobody is. Despite what one may imagine, Jonah wasn't the sole observer of the shift in 16-year-old Natalia Chase. Both the elite and junior football players has a fondness for his English instructor. He was arrogant and self-assured with. He was alluring because of his swagger. The age of most girls, but Natalia wasn't like the other girls. She was older, more. Chase was resolute and sophisticated. He began staying to catch her attention, asking for assistance after class with assignments for which he didn't require much assistance, with making up reasons to be close to her at. Natalia first dismissed Chase's advancements in which she was already participating. The final thing she required Jonah was yet another issue, but Chase was persistent, and Natalia soon discovered she found herself attracted to him in ways she had not. As anticipated, he differed from Jonah. Bolder, more assertive, and confident. One day, it was impossible to resist. Following a particularly contentious dispute, Natalia found herself alone with Jonah. The tension in her classroom with Chase was evident between them, and when Chase moved forward to kiss her, Natalia didn't draw away. Their affair was not the same as the one she shared with Chase, and Jonah focused on the physical in terms of meeting a need that had been accumulating for years inside her. They met recklessly in a dangerous situation, locations that are pushing the limits of what Natalia understood she was playing, but she was protected with flames, but the rush was irresistible. Chase gave her a sense of strength, like though she had authority for the first time in years, but the fire was still very much present. Natalia discovered that she was attracted to yet Riker, another pupil, was 18, a senior, such as Jonah, yet he was unable to have been more different, quiet, studious, and considerate. Riker was the sort of student who stayed after class to discuss literature and philosophy, not to. He had depth when he flirted with his teacher. Natalia was drawn to a sensitivity that reminded her of her aspirations and objectives. Before life wore her down, she had down Natalia, whom Riker had always idolized. She was everything he could imagine from a distance. Wanted to be well-educated, sophisticated, and resolute. When he began to spend some alone time with her, discussing books and ideas, he felt connection that was deeper than everything he'd encountered with his friends. Natalia, too, felt herself opening up to Riker in methods she hadn't used with Chase or Jonah. Their discussions were passionate and full of with mutual understanding and individual confesses, and shortly after, their friendship went too far from cerebral to personal. Their initial kiss was almost tender, uncertain, a sharp contrast to the flaming, her shared enthusiasm with Chase and Jonah. With Riker, it went beyond simply. It was more about the emotional than the physical relationship and the feeling of understanding. Natalia was aware that she had gone too far, yet she was unable to stop herself. Yearned for the spotlight, the thrill, the sensation that these young people want you, males. Yet, as the weeks passed, the pressure to keep 3 secrets, Natalia's affair started to weigh heavily. She was afraid and on edge all the time that a person would discover her career, her marriage, her life would be, because the excitement of the affair was beginning to wear off, replaced by an increasing feeling of fear that the guys were become more possessive and demanding. Everyone wants to spend more time with her. The strain reached a breaking point. The moment between Riker and Jonah. Chase began to believe they weren't one of the only ones in Natalia's life, started to recognize the subtle clues that she appeared preoccupied when they were combined, the enigmatic text messages, occasionally a slip of the tongue. Jealousy began to simmer, and along with it comes bitterness, fury, and a wish to face the reality Brooklyn has with its congested roads and vigilant neighbors, was set to become the focal point of controversy that would destroy Natalia's life. Believe she could manage the circumstances in which she may retain her hidden secrets, yet she was going to discover that the web she had woven was rather she had never imagined being so tangled. The repercussions of her actions were closing in, and the price she would pay for her illicit joy was considerably bigger than she could have ever envisioned. Brooklyn's fall season delivered cool to the atmosphere, yet within the confines of the tension at Kevin Madison High School, Natalia discovered it was heating up, herself becoming more and more involved in the web that she had constructed as her connections. Riker and Jonah. Chase grew closer, more severe and hazardous. What had begun as an exciting getaway, she was suddenly spinning out of her ordinary existence, unmanageable, and Natalia was starting to. Jonah was the first to sense the pressure, to recognize that there was a problem. What had once been an intensely thrilling, something was beginning to change with the affair. Natalia was preoccupied, far away, and they were losing their stolen moments. And further away, Jonah wasn't a fool. Might tell that someone or something else was taking up her time. As mistrust increased, a dark envy for not being able to get rid of Chase was growing restless as well. He flourished on focus and wasn't accustomed to being disregarded when Natalia started to cancel, making excuses during their meetings. Chase's total didn't add up. His laid-back manner became sour. Began to push back appearance, unexpectedly requesting her time. Love he wasn't accustomed to giving in. The possibility that Natalia is seeing. Anger was stoked inside by someone else. That being said, Riker was more subtle in his discomfort. He saw the alterations in Natalia's appearance, distracted even when they were alone themselves. The way her thoughts appeared to stray throughout. Riker was sensitive during their conversations. Kind and really devoted to. Unlike the other boys, Natalia. He sensed something, didn't he? Was incorrect, but he had no idea what he was aware that the lady he loved was slipping away from the idea and from him. He felt dread at the thought of losing her. The stress increased as the days stretched into weeks, become intolerable amongst the lads. They circled the area like predators, both competing for Natalia's same prey. Focus. Each one was identified as the. She picked Jonah out of jealousy. Started keeping a closer eye on Natalia. He noticed the following and followed her after school. The way she hovered in the hallways. She seems to hold secret meetings. In private, it didn't take long for him to recognize that he wasn't the only one evening after. Especially uncomfortable day, Jonah decided to confront Toya, who he had been waiting for his heart in the parking lot after school. His thoughts was rushing, thumping in his chest, with feelings of treachery when he eventually came out, he left conceals his face with a mask of restraint. Who is this angry person? He demanded, his voice intense but low. Who else are you seeing? Natalia's heart stopped for a moment. Time when she became aware of her meticulously crafted facade, constructed, was starting to fall apart. So she attempted to play it off, to laugh it away, but Jonah wasn't having it. He stepped closer, his body tense, his eyes burning with jealousy that Natalia hadn't seen before. Don't lie to me, Natalia, he cautioned, his voice cracking with anguish. I know you're with another person. I'd like to know who. Natalia paused, sandwiched between the truth as well as the falsehoods she had been spreading. Months before she was able to reply, Chase showed up in his typical swagger, replaced by a smoldering rage. He had seen them together, had noted the manner. Jonas seems to have a unique influence on Natalia, and he had no intention of allowing it to. Chase remarked, "What's going on here, Slide?" His tone accusatory as he approached the two. He looked from Jonah to Natalia, his expression dimming as the fragments began to fall into place. Jonah turned to face Chase, his fist gripping at his side. "You tell me," he spit. "What the hell are?" "Chase, you're here." Before Chase, Riker showed up at the edge to respond of the lot after observing the other. In contrast to Jonah, two lads from a distance, and Chase, Riker had never been confrontational, but the sight of the two boys with Natalia, the realization that his darkest worries were coming true, pushed him to act in a manner he never has before. "What are you doing?" Riker's voice was silent, but there was a hint of. Before he stepped, Natalia had not heard. His gaze was fixed on Natalia, looking for solutions, for some sort of confirmation of what he was witnessing wasn't genuine. The three were imprisoned by Natalia. The lads she was balancing were now in front of her, their rage, envy, and treachery emblazoned over their faces. There was no way out, no way to diffuse the circumstance. The truth was out, and the repercussions were about to come crashing. Jonah's feelings were exploding. Moved in Natalia's direction. "How could you?" His voice breaking. "He ordered that you do this. I believed I meant something to them, but it hurt. Chase, you never wanted to give up." Pushed Jonah back during a fight. She has been playing man, but she's not the only one. He growled, "But I won't allow her to make me seem foolish by standing on the confrontation's edge." Felt emotional outburst that he was unable to control. Had always been the quiet one, the thinker, the one who avoided conflict, but seeing Natalia in the middle of this watching the way she was being drawn in, different paths taken by Chase and Jonah. Something snapped inside him. And you too. Incorrectly, Riker remarked in a shaky voice. She's serious. She's not a game. Can prevail since you're a human, and she's tearing bring her apart. The situation escalated quickly. Chase never wanted to back down, swung at Jonah, his fist colliding with a crushing thud. Jonah staggered back, but swiftly struck back, hurling himself angrily at Chase. It had been brewing for weeks. The two guys were soon embroiled in a fierce battle, fists flying as Natalia looked in fear, powerless to halt what she had set in. Riker's frantic attempt to keep Natalia safe attempted to drag Chase aside, but he was pulled into the fray and into the mayhem. At least 3 lads were previously pals. Friends were now adversaries, forced to violence by their affection for the same woman. Natalia's attempts to intervene were futile. The boys were too far gone, too overwhelmed by their jealousy and rage. Should pay attention to logic as the battle raged on. The situation became increasingly risky, and Chase seized a hold of the moment's heat. Unfastened metal pipe that sprang up out of the earth, furiously flinging it toward Jonah to deliver the hit, fell with a terrible snap, and Jonah went down, hard blood pouring from a gash on his head. Natalia screamed, rushing to Jonah's side, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Seeing Jonah on the Riker lost control as the ground remained still, attacked Chase and threw him to the hammering his fist into Chase's face in a rage that shocked even Chase. Resisted on his own, although he was dazed. The battle swiftly escaping Natalia's command over the pandemonium, sprang to her feet, her thoughts whirling. She needed to take action to put an end to this before things grew much worse. Yet as she looking around, she realized with a horrifying fear that there wasn't. The lads were out of control, so stop it. Because she was unable to prevent the violence that she had inadvertently introduced. Action in wild wrath, Riker grabbed for Chase. Had utilized the metal pipe too. He swung it at Chase and struck Jonah, force with which he was knocked. The battle was done, but the unconscious Chase laid on the damage which could not be repaired, blood accumulating on the ground underneath him. Jonah's breathing remained steady. Natalia stood still, shallow and laborious. She couldn't comprehend what had just occurred, that the youngsters she had looked after were now lying about, being loved in her own manner. At her feet, wounded and shattered, the situation's truth started to seep in. Given the seriousness of her actions, the affair was crushing her with its weight. The lies and secrets that it had all resulted in. This moment would be a turning point. Forever throughout their lives, the sound of, in the distance, sirens brought Natalia returning to the present. Someone had contacted the cops, and panic was on their way. Set in when Natalia recognized the size of the recent events. There is no way to hide this or conceal it. Yes, the facts were known, and there would be repercussions that she experienced, never thought about when she initially crossed. Jonah's statement, when they arrived, the situation was chaotic. In an ambulance, Chase was carried away. Jonah was rushed while still unconscious to the hospital in a critical state, dazed and soaked in blood. Riker was shackled and put in the rear of Natalia. The police vehicle was interrogated on the observe her dull mind while she attempted to explain the inexplicable. Media swiftly lowered itself on the school, turning. The narrative becomes a national phenomenon. Brooklyn was plagued by scandal, and Natalia was ripped apart throughout her life, marriage, her profession, and her standing. In a moment, everything was shattered. Her employment was halted pending under examination, and shortly the depth of her connections with Jonah, Riker, and Chase emerged as word got out. Brooklyn became a hot spot of rumors and conjecture. Local news channels camp out in front of Natalia's brownstone, once silent, catching each moment when she fell from a reputable teacher to neighbors who are a public disgrace, who had previously appreciated her for her devotion to her pupils now murmur about her scandalous actions. Natalia discovered that she was alone, not only with her family, but also from her community. Parker, her spouse, came back to discover the betrayal left their lives in tatters. Profoundly, and in spite of his initial surprise, he couldn't forgive him, so he filed for divorce in an effort to separate from the disorder that had taken over their life. Parker left Brooklyn and relocated elsewhere. Natalia in the rear, in an area that felt similar to a jail without her spouse. Natalia's career was forced to deal with the repercussions of her behavior alone. The weight of her choices started to crumble. She used to be a confident and self-assured lady, now battled tremendous emotions. She discovered it out of humiliation and remorse. Challenging to look in the mirror, not to mention the world beyond the scandal's emotional toll caused her into a depressive cycle in which she doubted each decision she had taken. She had discarded the boys' lives. Each of the scandal's participants dealt with their tragedy, each in their own unique manner. Jonah, seriously hurt from the encountered a protracted and agonizing recuperation. The once talented athlete was now suffering from bodily wounds, mental scars that plagued him every day. His aspirations to pursue a career in athletics were rushed, and he had trouble locating a replacement. Life's direction, struggling with the feeling of treachery and the aggression. He had met Chase in spite of being one of the main participants in the fight, was left with a unique set of obstacles. There were serious injuries, and the incident had an enduring effect on his mental health. He became reclusive after the experience, and resentful of the public's ruling and the resulting legal ramifications of his behavior in attempting to deal with. Considering the tragedy of what had transpired, Chase's self-assurance was destroyed, and he battled to regain his identity. In the middle of the turmoil, Riker was also extremely. He was transferred to juvenile because of this incarceration due to his involvement in the event. It was a difficult event, and the time there compelled him to face the severity of his behavior, despite the fact that he took action based on his belief that defend the truth about the brutality that he had taken part in impacted significantly on. Riker attempted to make the most of his stay in detention to consider and improve personal development, but the route to the process of redemption was drawn out and unclear. The scandal's aftermath left a profound scar on the Brooklyn community. Madison High School was formerly a location of learning and development, were now seen as emblem of failure and treachery. The administrators of the institution faced severe reprimands for their negligence, and the absence of attempts at prevention were designed to restore confidence in the neighborhood. But the dam had been completed. The emphasis switched to guaranteeing the security, pupils' welfare, and attending to the structural problems that had made it possible for them. How to tell Natalia's tale, while sad, turned into a warning story, served as a warning about the repercussions of power abuse and the significance of alertness in safeguarding those who are most susceptible members of the community. While, with assistance, the scars started to heal, mechanisms established to deal with the psychological and emotional effects on. In the end, everyone engaged in Natalia's downfall was intricate and multidimensional. Tragedy, it was a tale of treachery, heartache, and the terrible repercussions of decisions motivated by desire and hopelessness. The reverberations of that terrible evening continued long after the headlines, which served as a clear reminder of the fragility of faith in the long-term consequences of one's behavior on the life of Natalia was permanently altered when she confronted the harsh truth of her circumstances with after the trial, the media flurry. She was left to grapple as she slowly faded. Given the repercussions of her behavior, her career was in decline, and her marriage had ended. Her reputation was destroyed, and there were ruins. She was beyond repair and had been given a sentence of 25 years behind bars, with the possibility of 15-year parole is a severe but predictable result considering the seriousness of or offensive